you very much for accommodating the Gleaner this afternoon. You know that you have a very busy schedule, and we appreciate the fact that you have given us an opportunity to pose some questions that the public may be interested in getting some answers to. The first question that I'll ask, the investigative unit at the Integrity Commission, we understand, has made an adverse recommendation as far as you're concerned for allegedly failing to provide information that was requested to complete an analysis of your 2016 statutory declaration. The last thing we heard officially is that the 2017 declaration has still not been cleared by the Commission. Can you, Prime Minister, just clear up for the public what is this status?
In 2016, when I was asked to provide information to the Integrity Commission, we had just taken office, and it was a very hectic schedule, and I was not able to respond to the Integrity Commission in the time that they had placed in their letter of request for the information. I subsequently asked for an extension, and an extension was given. I have completed and returned and provided the Integrity Commission with all the questions that they have asked. It is as a result of doing that why my integrity report for 2018 was published publicly. As you would know, that it wouldn't be possible to public and certify the integrity report for 1 year without considering all the years before, because obviously balances carry forward into current years, and therefore if there were an issue with a previous year, then that would have to be resolved before the subsequent years could be published. And I believe that I went through that process thoroughly, in great detail, provided all the answers that were required, and you would have seen the result, the publishing and gazetting of my integrity report. Now, just to be clear, I have not had any further communications about any outstanding information. And if there were, I would certainly seek to provide it right away, but I'm not in possession of any request for any further information. Let me just be clear. Under the new dispensation, it is important that everyone responds to the Integrity Commission and files their report on a timely basis. It's very difficult, and I want to just use the opportunity to say that it's very difficult for persons sometimes to find the time to put together these reports. It's time-consuming and sometimes very costly. But as we move into this new era of public accountability, where public officers are required to do this, I would use the opportunity to make the appeal, even using my own case, to say, make every effort to comply with the requests of the Integrity Commission.
Mr. Prime Minister, would it be fair to say that your government has not successfully tackled corruption and ended rampant corruption as indicated in your manifesto?
The government has always accepted that there have been issues which have raised concerns about corruption. And it is not something that the government can deny. And in fact, it is in the government's interest to accept these criticisms and to work harder to correct them. What I believe that the public has seen and would generally agree is that the government has not sought to cover up, hide, or sweep under the carpet any of these issues. We have confronted them and we have addressed them. What is within our powers to do, we have sought to discover further what the issues are. We have investigated where we have the powers to investigate, and we have held to account, ultimately, people who have authority. I think that if you were to compare how this government has addressed the issues of corruption, because this government is not more corrupt than any other government, If you were to look at the Contractor General's reports on the previous government, there would be far more issues that were raised for which there was no action taken. In this administration, persons have been held to account and action has been taken. We have taken administrative action where we can. The investigative process has been strengthened, and many of these issues and allegations are currently being investigated. I think that we have placed the resources with the investigative agencies to be able to carry out their investigations and ultimately prosecution. So my view is that corruption cannot be tolerated. We cannot hide from it. We cannot hide it, sweep it under the carpet, and we must take direct and complete action for these issues. And I believe that this government has done so.
Prime Minister, as a quick follow-up to the question Edmond just asked, you promised to delve into the issue of the use of non-disclosure agreements at CMU and report back to the country. Can you tell us whatever you found, and can you tell us also if you will contemplate releasing those members of the council that who resigned?
So, a very good question. So, I've asked the permanent secretary to provide me with the non-disclosure agreements, and she has. And we have been very clear that those agreements should not stand. So, very shortly, I will communicate to the permanent secretary to officially release those board members who are still on the board. Now remember, a new board is in place. So those non-disclosure agreements probably would still be effective, but I will say to the permanent secretary that where they are effective, they should be released. Because I believe it runs counter to public institutions having these kinds of non-disclosure agreements.
Just to clarify, the members of the new board, it was never...
No, that's what I'm saying. There's no effective non-disclosure agreement for them, no.
Prime Minister, there have been calls from civil society and in fact from the leadership of the Integrity Commission for lawmakers, well, the government by extension, lawmakers, to review the Integrity Commission Act and to provide an opportunity for them to carry out their duties in a more transparent manner so that they can, in fact, interact with the public. Mr. Greg Christie, as it has been reported by the Integrity Commission, is returning to the Integrity Commission. And under his administration, when he was at the Office of the Contractor General, many persons were upset with the way he carried out his responsibility in that he interacted with the public and the media. The question is, Mr. Prime Minister, is your administration willing to revisit what they call the muzzle clause in that legislation? And do you any at all have any issue with Mr. Greg Christie's approach in his fight against corruption?
I won't make any direct comments on the Integrity Commission and how they carry out their function. I will say that it is now within the period of time prescribed in law for the bill to be reviewed, and the government is moving towards putting in place a committee of parliament to have the bill reviewed. I think by the next sitting of parliament, we should be able to name a joint select committee to review the bill. And I won't preempt what the parliamentarians will conclude. I will say, however, that the strategy for dealing with corruption cannot only rely on naming and shaming, that much more effort has to be put into the investigative powers and the prosecutorial powers. And I think that is where you will have greater impact.
Prime Minister, now that it's appears to say that Minister Vaz will not be, his visa has not been reinstated. Can you can you indicate, are you inclined to keep him in the cabinet for the remainder of your tenure? And would you consider him for a cabinet position if and when the JLP wins?
So I can't comment on whether or not Minister Vaz will get back his visa, whether or not his visa will be reinstated. That is purely within the powers of the United States and their process. There is always a consideration as to whether or not a minister can be effective and carry out his duties without having an American visa. Consider, of course, that a minister or anyone could be denied their visa for a multiplicity of reasons. And therefore, the question is, should a prime minister deny someone who legitimately deserves to be a minister that opportunity because he or she does not possess the visa of a foreign country? That is a consideration that has to be carefully thought through. And I'm carefully reviewing that.
But if the minister serve at the pleasure of the prime minister.
And that's the point. So I'm carefully thinking about it. So one has to be careful. So then, it could always be the case that a country could have control over the structure of your cabinet. So I have to think about these things very carefully.
Mr. Prime Minister, in an interview on Nationwide Radio with the host Cliff Hughes at the time, U.S. Ambassador Donald Tapia, he said he had lobbied your administration to request support in re-electing Luis Almagro as the Secretary General of the OAS. Will the Jamaican government be fulfilling this, the wishes of Washington, and why would you be doing this?
The Jamaican government is lobbied every day. And we have been lobbied by many other governments other than the United States to support other candidates. To this point, we have not disclosed where our support will go. We are considering very carefully those countries that have lobbied us, and closer to the time, we will make our views known just before our vote.
Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Prime Minister. At this time, in terms of the leadership of Venezuela, which of the two, Juan Guaido or Mr. Nicolas Maduro, which of the two did Jamaica recognize as the legitimate president of that country?
The person who has claimed victory from the last election is Nicolas Maduro. We have been very clear in saying that we believe that the election was not one that was conducted under the principles of the free and fair elections that we as Jamaicans espouse. As to whether or not Mr. Guaido could be considered the de facto president, we have not come to that conclusion because our analysis of the Venezuelan constitution, and we are open to further perspectives on this, but our analysis of the constitution would not support that perspective. We're still examining, we're still looking at it, and we have asked experts and other persons who have greater skills in examining the constitution of Venezuela to advise us. When that process is complete, we may make other decisions, but at this point, our preliminary examination is such.
Prime Minister, I'm going to be presumptuous and say that I am sure that you accept that the people of Jamaica deserves to know why you accepted the resignation of the former Minister of Education. Can you just, in other words, help them to understand why you accepted?
Well, I don't think there's any mystery. I think what has been subsequently revealed would justify the acceptance. Once I had knowledge of the allegations that were made, I had no choice, obviously, but to bring the minister before me, have a conversation about the issues that are now subsequently public knowledge, and ensure that there can be integrity in the process. It would have been, I think, an erosion of integrity of the entire system of government were that process not to be engaged. I think what we have suffered from for a very long time, even in the previous administrations, when these issues have been raised, no one is held to account. The difference with this government is the ministers have been brought in, we have had our conversation, and they have submitted their resignations, and I have accepted.
Just to be clear, Prime Minister, you indicated that you became aware of the allegations. How did you become aware of the allegations? One, and two, you have a personal friendship with former Minister Reid, and how is that now?
So Minister Reid and myself, we have had a very good professional relationship. From his days as president of the JTA, I was opposition spokesman on education. We see eye to eye on education issues. He was my advisor. We have mutual friends. And as Prime Minister, my job is to keep my ears to the ground. So you don't always have to have evidence, but you need to have information. So information comes to me by all kinds of means. And when information is brought to my attention, then the ministerially responsible thing to do is to investigate, put in a process of discovery. And that's what I have done in all issues that have come. So if an allegation is made, I will call in the person against whom the allegation is made. We'll ask questions. We'll have a conversation. Many times it's heart to heart. Many times it is, this is what has to happen. A direction is given. So that was a process that I've used.
And the friendship?
I from time to time, will communicate with former Minister Reid. There are still issues on education, which he will send me a note on. I will hear what he has to say. But obviously, I don't have the luxury of frequent communications.
So, Prime Minister, I've heard you on this before, but I want to hear again the question of job description for ministers. You had made that commitment about more than 4 years, about 4 years ago.
So it wasn't a job description, it was a job letter, meaning an itemization of the duties and of specific things that they need to achieve. Right. The truth is that there is no job description for ministers. And as we enter into the era of performance-based pay, which we are behind the scenes doing quite a bit of work on that, we will have to do a job description, not just for ministers, but also for permanent secretaries. So that is presently being worked on.
The Jamaica Labour Party, the Jamaica Labour Party Prime Minister gave a commitment in the 2016 manifesto, and it says, quote, "We will make it mandatory for appointments to sensitive posts to be approved by 2/3 majority of both houses of parliament." Two of those sensitive positions that was listed in the manifesto came up for appointment during this administration, that of the Chief Justice and that of the Governor of the Bank of Jamaica. But it clearly was business as usual. I wanted to understand, Prime Minister, the rationale for the proposal and what has happened to it.
Well, the proposal still remains part of the policy framework of the Jamaica Labour Party. The challenge is, of course, how do we implement this? And I think that there are several things that we will have to do before we reach to that point of being able to subject, for example, critical posts to the cut and thrust of our parliamentary system. So the question for us is, are we at that stage to do this? I would say not yet. Is it still an aspiration of the party that this is how our country should be run as we develop our governance system? Yes, it is still a part of our aspirations.
So, Prime Minister,
It was just, I think we still have some phases to go through before we are, and you see, you have to be careful. So the American system has that kind of parliamentary involvement in precisely, but you could also just come very quickly to the conclusion that it does lengthen the time it takes to make appointments and to get government running efficiently. So can we do that trade-off now with getting appointments done quickly, along with having an extended period of parliamentary diligence? So I'm saying we're not quite there yet, but we should get there.
Prime Minister, earlier this afternoon we got a report that 2 gunmen killed a bus driver on the premises at Rhodes Hall High in Hanover. And you know, Mr. Prime Minister, that SOE is in that parish and adjoining parishes. Up to February 20, the number of murders, as you may know, reported was 167. And up to this point, I think there's a 10% increase over the previous year. PM, how we feel in our fight against crime? What's up?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked it, because there are many Jamaicans who are probably feeling this sense of concern about where we are with crime. The truth is, as I've said on many occasions, that our crime situation has evolved currently to be over and above our established capacity to address it. And what we're doing now is, in an intense way, putting in place resources, systems, and personnel integrated with technology to address the crime situation. We have used one particular strategy of states of public emergency, which has helped significantly in attenuating, that is, reducing the frequency and intensity of crime, lowering the volume a little bit. And whilst we have this respite, we are using it to improve our police station and the conditions under which policemen work. We're using it to introduce greater technology, and that is going on. We have improved the fleet of the police force, including tracking devices on cars, and we're integrating more technology, including our cameras. We're doing everything possible to increase the capacity of the police force to be able to handle and reduce the level of crime that we have. And I think you're seeing it unfolding successfully in the number of gangs that we have been able to target and bring before the courts. This condition did not happen yesterday. It did not happen last year. This is an accumulation of over 30 years of underinvestment in our national security apparatus. It is going to take time to reduce it, but I'm confident that we are at a good place now in terms of the investments that we have made, and those investments will bear fruit.